Doug Rising Show. Well, the Doug Rising Show. And I'm Doug Rice. Oh, you know, I'm dancing while I'm doing it, so forgive me. Good morning, Doug Rice. Yeah, baby, how you doing? Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, and here you are listening to me. Well. Capital, thank you so much. And thus and such. Are you watching the news, Negroes? Yes, you are. 300,000 strong. Boy, they about to march in. Oh, boy, they are massing. They're ready, aren't they? Boy, but you know, while I'm on the subject of the news, I gotta say, you know, I don't know if it's a good idea just to trounce in as if everything is everything. You know, 300,000 people, you just decided. Is that what you did? Let me tell you something, what they did. And I don't give two damns about either side. Palestinians, Israelis, Polish, Ukrainians, Afghanistans, all the nations got together and said, let's enslave Negroes. So just understand where I'm coming from while I come from there. And so I've said 300,000 Israeli soldiers are going to just pounce into Gaza. Let me ask you Negroes something. I mean, the calculus that they have now, the algorithmic calculus they have now, I mean, it's beyond measure. They can solve problems they've been looking to solve for thousands of years in a mere few seconds. Don't you think they've calculated everything these Israelis are going to do? And what are they going to do? Are they doing something predictable? If, then, I'll say it again, if, then, that's how things work. If I do this, then this will happen. If I do this, then that will happen. And if, then, was taken into consideration before they decided to lob any number of thousands of missiles into the heart of Jerusalem and Israel, let me tell you. And I can also assure you that I'm pretty impressed by their accuracy in immediately blaming Iran, which took full culpability in the movement. And if you think that they thought to give these Palestinians, the Hamas, whomever, thousands of rockets, what else do you think they might have? And there you go, predictably, trouncing in 300,000 fresh Israeli soldiers in the middle of the conflict created by your very presence. And let's talk about that as you tune in this Wednesday, October 11th, 2023, to listen to me. The topics that I discuss are not going to be popular. The topics that I discuss do not draw a crowd. In fact, I will tell you the topics are few topics ever spoken out loud. Now, I've been doing this since God knows when, but let's just call it 2021, January 6th. Okay? And as this show has progressed, Detrina and I and all involved have developed a format that involves reading and disseminating information for Negroes in an oratory fashion. And the reason I do this, first, you may not have time to read the books that need to be read. You may not want to. And so I offer this show, the Doug Rice Show, as a way of getting out the information they want so desperately not to be gotten out. Now, let's begin with something simple. Today, I posted this, Israel is being attacked, and that's all they seem to talk about, being attacked. They won't get into the details of why they're being attacked and why they've been in threat of being attacked since the day they got there back in 1948. Take it all in. All right? Now you're watching that. Let me just say proudly first, that is my most viewed TikTok on this, my 7th TikTok account. I mean, typically they cap my TikTok views at about 300 to 400. They've been rising to about 500. They're controlling the narrative. We know this. But this particular post on my TikTok post has probably gone on 3,000 views. And that's the most I've ever had on this particular, not platform, but particular account, because I've had 7 of them. And I want to tell you that this hits them hard. This hits those programmed by Ashkenazi imposters to protect Israel and its false identity at all costs. This post they've called racist. You're racist much? I've been called a racist. I'm not impressed. I'm a Negro in America. It's impossible for me to affect the ebb and flow of the lives of other races, and so therefore I am not a racist. Now, if I have an opinion about folks who glom themselves within the racial construct created by these Caucasians, I don't apologize. But back to Israel is being attacked, and that's all they seem to talk about, being attacked. They won't get into the details. Now, I'm pretty sure that the racist connotations that they're taking in all revolve around that word, details. The details of why they're being attacked and why they've been in threat of being attacked since the day they got there back in 1948. And it's all in the details now, isn't it? Yes, it is. 1948, 70 years ago, it's a long time ago, right? And they were told when they arrived, when they settled into these areas, that they would have no peace. Now, I don't agree with that sentiment. I think if assigned land is assigned to you, you should be assigned that land and left to be there. And I also believe in a kind of a freedom of movement. I don't want to nearly inconvenience anybody for any reason. If I can be amicable and, if I can be friendly and not at odds with other nations, I'd rather be friendly. But it was said upon the arrival of those who associate themselves so closely with Judaistic belief, being converted to that belief in Europe when they were Khazarians, and of course after they were defeated by the Prince of Ukraine, they became Ukrainians. Keep in mind that the Ukrainians who were Khazarians were of Judaistic belief, and understand the Prince of Ukraine from their country he relieved. I'm just trying to mess around. Yeah, the Prince of Ukraine defeated Khazaria. Khazaria was filled with converted Jews. That's what's going on. That's what this is about. Now, it's all about identity, right? Right? I mean, that's what this is about. So if it is about identity, we're going to delve into what identifies. It's important, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, Negroes, Hebrews, true Israel. It's important that your identity be associated with something you can identify with, or what's the use in having an identity? And in this particular show, we're going to bring proofs of identity. And in that, those proofs lie in what are called generational curses. Now, generational curses is probably the best way to assist in identifying a tribe or nation of people who claim a personage, a place, a position. And the reason that's important is because what's tied into those generational curses is a story about those people. And if the curses is what identifies, then, well, there's nothing else to really talk about, is it? Because that's a negative confirmation. And nobody likes a negative confirmation. So if generational curses is what identifies a people, then let the matter be established. And that's what we're going to look in today, because you see, the people that claim to be us, the people that claim to be Israel, claim so without generational curses applied. I'm going to say that again. These individuals who claim to be Israel, who are being attacked by Palestinians, everyone's culpable in the enslavement of Negroes. Nobody's pardoned here. We're just identifying, right? These individuals say that this is who they are, and the only real way to identify who they are is to look through their history. And if that doesn't work, then perhaps we need to identify them through generational curses that are to be applied through the individuals that they claim to be. Now, this is just fact. Now, do me a favor, share, like, subscribe to this. Please, your likes, I understand, help me on the algorithms of YouTube, as if they give a damn. They don't. Hit the notification bell. They will never tell you when I am on. So let's just stop playing with each other. The only way you can truly support this effort is to give. And I say that, well, with all seriousness, because I've had to make decisions that have separated me from the common Negro. I'm going to say that pointedly. And so it minimizes my ability to make a living because I am not in a get along kind of goddamned mood. I'm not busy putting together these things that go in houses so I can have somebody come in and steal them later. I'm trying to store some stuff up in an unseen place. And that means I can't really be agreeable with too many people. So do yourselves, if you would, do me, not yourselves, do yourselves the disservice of parting yourself some money, if you would, and use the edifices below to support and do me a service, please. You just can't get along with everybody now. People, listen, the divide is happening. We're going in two different directions, and I find myself recessing from those pursuing worldly pursuits. I do. I can't. Especially if you're not going to do it honestly, and if you're not going to treat people well, I have to depart. And if I see that your focus is so focused on the world, I have nothing to do with you. And so that minimizes my opportunities to interact and make money. And so I don't have a problem asking for donations. It no longer makes me feel funny. And I'm going to land there. All right, here we go. Generational curses. Again, thank you for tuning into the show. See, I meant it. There you go. All right, generational curses. This is what identifies who these people say they are. I mean, they've been telling people we're Israel. They've been telling people we're associated with King David. They've been telling people they're from the tribe of thus, such, and so. That's what they've been saying. But do the generational curses make it a fact? Let's find out. Generational curses, I will scatter them also among the heathen, whom neither they nor their fathers have known. I will send a sword after them till I have consumed them. Jeremiah 9:6. Now, understand, folks, and I'm going to do this before we get into this. They're going to do all kind of somersaults, backflips, Greg Gainer, perfect landings, and try to measure all sorts of understandings to make it all about them. But let's face the facts, folks. They are not Shem. All right. And I think I can make this a little bigger. So let's do that. Not a coincidence that we, the so-called African Americans, are the most oppressed, disrespected, and unfairly treated people in the Americas. Whoa, and that's the truth. We got no respect unless we're dancing and singing and playing ball and, just shucking and jiving. And there is a sound biblical reason for the injustice that has been placed upon us and our ancestors during our 400 plus years stay here in America. And throughout this chapter, I will be revealing to you exactly what that reason is. But in order to understand the condition that we as Black people living in America are facing, we must first understand the biblical prophecies. As a result of slavery and having our identities and history stripped away from us, many of us have read the Bible our entire lives and still haven't been able to understand who and what the prophecies inside it are referring to. It also appears some are having a problem doing the same thing across the pond, eh? Therefore, we read the Bible with a distorted perspective, thinking what's written in the scriptures applies to everyone, but they don't. The Bible was written by Hebrews, Israelites, to Hebrews, to Israelites. I don't do the Hebrew Israelites thing because it's such a stigma on that connective tissue, but that's an entirely different issue. In other words, it was written for us, by us, Negroes. With this in mind, you should now be able to understand why there is so much confusion going on inside of the religious communities today with use of our Bible as their source of faith. Now, how funny does that look? Can you imagine? Now I'm envisioning, the lighter side of America in church in its most segregated hour, high noon Sunday, and them just singing the praises of our God, associating themselves with our people, and in no way having any association except through us, those that they marginalize, mitigate, enslave, torture, murder, and kill. But there's more still. Next, the Bible is our history book, and the scriptures only discuss the faith of the Hebrews, of the Israelites, which was in Yahuwah, or Yehovah, the God of Israel, and Yahusha, also known as Jesus, Yeshua. Other people have names, how they directed, the Messiah of Israel. However, being a Hebrew, being an Israelite, is not a religion. It's not a religion. It's our nationality. We're Hebrews because we came from the bloodline of Abraham, who was a Hebrew. And we're Israelites because our forefathers are descendants from the 12 tribes of Jacob, who was the first Israelite. This makes us Hebrews. This makes us Israelites. Or, for the love of God, Hebrew Israelites. There you go. So this is not a religion for us. This is our identity. I like that better. The writings in the Bible were written to inform and instruct us how we're supposed to live as God's chosen people. But as a result of the original children of Israel's disobedience to God's laws and commandments, they were later removed from their land and sent into several different enslavements, which have discussed in the previous chapter. However, slavery was not their only curse. Let's stop. Slavery was not their only curse. If you recall, after Moses led the children of Israel out of bondage in Egypt, God gave them an entire list of curses that would befall them if they did not keep his commandments. These curses were prophecies describing what the Hebrew Israelites would face in their future lives for their disobediences. The curses were to serve as a permanent sign, an indicator as to who the children of Israel are throughout all their generations. Let's stop, shall we? Did you hear it? And let me just say this, if we might. Jews don't talk about generational curses at all. Jews don't talk about going into enslavement. Jews do not talk about going into slavery in boats. Jews don't talk about none of that. Jews just don't. Let's not fool ourselves, partner. Oh, we know what they talking about, man. Talking about finance. They definitely talk about finance. They talk about child sex, slavery, and trafficking. They definitely talk about that. Yes, they talk about organ trafficking, human organs. They are definitely into that, because every time I look up and there's a ring of child sex trafficking and human organ trafficking rings busted by police, you can look at the last names and it's like a readout on jewelry. So, there's that. Let's get back to this. Oh, goodness. Okay, therefore, if we are the true descendants of the biblical Hebrew Israelites, then our condition should match these curses, and their condition should match these curses. Correct. I want everybody to maintain a duality in your thought as we continue to read, because not only are we identifying who we are as true Hebrews, but then we are also identifying those who claim to be true Hebrews as a goddamned lie. So let's go over these curses in detail and gather some knowledge on why we as a people are suffering so much oppression in America. As we progress through this chapter, the striking parallels between us and the curses will become more and more evident, and the striking unparallelities between them and the curses will also become evident. You don't see that because I read that in my own mind. Okay. Leaving you without any doubt in your mind that we are the people of the book and they are not. I'm going to just keep going. Yeah. Physical curses. In addition to prophecy of being carried away to the Americas on slave ships, Moses also foretold that a number of physical curses, visually seen misfortunes, would be placed upon the Israelites. In Deuteronomy 28:32, Prophet Moses states that thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. Stop. When have you seen any of these people's children being given to someone else? I'm listening. Yeah, I'm listening. Okay, so we'll mark that off. But us, on the other hand, good Lord, the sex farms, the just snatching children from parents and telling them they've been going over to the Johnson plantation. That's about 40 miles over. Yeah, go ahead, Bessie Sue, take the child. I'll take $400-500 for the sister. That's how they roll, without care, without concern. That's what they did to us, all initiated by the individuals who have the audacity to call themselves true Israel today. Next. I had to do that. Okay, thy sons and thy daughters will be given to another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. And we know what that means. No might in thine hand means they'll take your kids and you can't do anything about it. You better read into what it says, what God is telling us the curses produced. They take your children, and you will look for them and fail to see them, and there shall be no might in thine hand. Folks, here, just in case you can't see it, I want to make sure. See it right there? There's what it says. In verse 41, he continues on to say that thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them. They shall go into captivity. These curses that Moses said would come upon the descendants of Israel fell directly upon our ancestors during the days of slavery. When did it happen to an Ashkenazi European convert? Before our ancestors were shipped to the Americas, they were sold on auction blocks. I've never seen a Jew on an auction block. They were on the slave ports surrounding the west coasts of Africa. During these slave auctions, there were instances when entire families were brought out to the coast and then separated through their bond, where the father and mother would end up on one ship and the sons and daughters on another. During these auctions, the eyes of mothers and fathers would be filled with tears as they watched their sons and daughters aboard ships with their new owners, knowing that they would never see their children again. Now, let me pause before I get too upset, because the best is certainly to come yet. You listen to me, Negroes. All these Jews talk about is that goddamned Holocaust. That's it. 6 million people. That's their number. And they'll scream that goddamn number to the high heavens for the rest of their existence, if God allows it. But never have I ever heard any of them talk about their goddamn children being sold into slavery. Never have I heard a Jew tell anyone else that someone took their goddamn child. And that's just description one. There's plenty more before we get done. But this separation of families did not just happen in the slave auctions on the coasts of Africa. It also happened right here in America. In his work, The Effects of Slavery and the Emancipation on African American Families and Family History Research, historian Tristan L. Tolman, AG, recorded that slave owners regularly separated black family members from each other by sale. The constant withdrawal of family members, especially men, from slave families damaged and sometimes destroyed slave marriages and families. One great tragedy of the involuntary separation of children was that many of the slave marriages endured long enough to produce children that had been nurtured by both their parents before being sold away. No slave was immune to the danger of family separation. Mr. Tolman's account of enslaved children being sold off away from their parents to other slave owners as identical to the biblical prophecy of Moses, which stated, "Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, Thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Therefore, since no other race of people were shipped away from the Eastern world into the Western world and were forced to watch their children be sold off to other slave owners, then we can easily conclude that we, the so-called African Americans, are the descendants of the Israelites. Well, I'll be a Negro. You would think if somebody ripped their children from them, you'd be reading about it. You would think if somebody took their children and threw their goddamned children into slavery, that we'd be told. And you can best believe the story would never get old. But no, I hear about the Holocaust. I know about the ovens. I know about the number of people. I know about Treblinka. I know about Auschwitz. I know about Buchenwald. How do I know these things? I know about Hitler. I know about the Nazis. I know about the Polish ghetto. I know about the Balfour Act, but I don't know about anybody selling anybody's goddamned children into slavery. Next. However, there is much more evidence to be revealed that will prove even further of this truth. So journey with me as I continue connecting the dots of the curses placed on the Israelites with the plight of Black America. Another physical curse that Moses prophesied to happen to the descendants of Israel was that they would be hit with all types of different sicknesses that would wipe them out. In Deuteronomy 28:22, he stated that the Lord shall smite thee with a fever and with consumption, wasting away of the body, and with a fever and with an inflammation, and with extreme burning, and with the sword, and with blasting, and with mildew. And they, the physical illnesses, shall pursue thee until you perish. Many of these illnesses happened to our ancestors on the Middle Passage. In case you're not familiar with the Middle Passage, it was the ship route that Europeans took to transport our ancestors from Africa to the Americas. The Middle Passage usually took more than 7 weeks. And it has been recorded as the worst experience the Hebrew slaves ever had to face because of the horrible living conditions they had to survive on the ships. Once they boarded the ships, the slaves were chained together, sent to the bottom of the ships, and crammed into spaces less than 5 feet high. Some scholars have noted that slaves were packed together like books upon a shelf, so close that the shelf would not easily contain more. As a result of the slaves being packed together like sardines without barely any room to breathe, let alone move, many of them were forced to urinate and take bowel movements on themselves, cause the smell of the bottom of the ships to make people vomit and faint. Consequently, the disease rates on the slave ships were very high, and many of the slaves died from incurable fevers. In his book, Black Cargo, Mr. Mannix states, wet and blowing weather have occasion to cause the porthole window to be shut and the grating window bars to be covered. Fluxes and fevers among the Negroes ensued. pause for a moment and read the last name of the writer. The deck that is the floor of their rooms was so covered with blood and mucus which had proceeded from them in consequence of the flux that it resembled a slaughterhouse. Number of the slaves having fainted, they were carried upon deck, where several died. Just as Moses prophesied, fevers had consumed the Hebrews, the Israelites, and caused them to perish. Another prophecy of Moses stated that, "And the Lord will smite thee with botch of Egypt, and with the emerods, and with the scab, and with the itch, wherein those cannot be healed." The botch of Egypt in this verse is referred to a boil, which was a skin disease similar to the shingles that God brought upon the Egyptians to help Moses free the Israelites from slavery. The emerods was also a skin disease, dried up sores that appeared on the surface of one's skin, causing a continual irritating itch. In modern day terms, this is called smallpox, a disease that many of the slaves feared getting because, unlike today, it was incurable during their time. If one on the ship caught smallpox, then the ship would get it. This was also confirmed by the Encyclopedia of the Middle Passage, which states that epidemics of disease spread like wildfire in the tightly packed cargo holds and could wipe out hundreds at a time. Smallpox was particularly disastrous because there was no cure. Slaves showing the slightest sign of smallpox or other deadly diseases were thrown overboard alive to prevent an epidemic aboard the ship, which could cost the trader thousands of dollars. It is said that sharks often followed slave ships because so many bodies were thrown overboard. Consequently, at least 35% of all enslaved ancestors died before even arriving to the Americas due to incurable physical illnesses and skin disease. And so we pause for a moment. Let me ask you, have you heard of this happening to the Ashkenazi European converts now at war with Palestine? Have you heard of Jews being thrown overboard to sharks? Have you heard of them passing away through disease, death? Have you heard any of this? Or no, have you focused solely on the persecution suffered not 100 years ago? Is that all you've heard? Because I've not heard any of the generational curses needed to be identified as a Hebrew, and they claim to be Hebrews. They walk around possessing an identity they have no goddamn association with. Why? Well, simple. The generational curses don't apply. As the prophet Moses predicted, the botch and emerods, smallpox, infected our Hebrew ancestors, our Israelite ancestors, to the point of death, and were not able to be healed. However, not only did God promise to bring upon us the diseases and plagues that were written in the book of the law, he also promised to bring upon new diseases that mankind has never known. In Deuteronomy, it states that the Lord will bring upon you and your descendants extraordinary plagues, great and prolonged plagues, and serious and prolonged sicknesses. Moreover, he will bring back on you all the diseases of Egypt, of which you were afraid, and they shall cling to you. Also, every sickness and every plague which is not written in this book of the law will the Lord bring upon you until you are destroyed. Notice the Father said to you and your descendants. This means you and me. To prove that these curses have been placed upon us, let's take a look at the physical conditions of our people today. According to the Net Wellness Consumer Health Information, the so-called African American leads the nation in infant deaths, heart disease, cancer, strokes, diabetes, and AIDS, and have a greater risk of attaining these diseases than any other race or nation of people. The Centers of Disease Control and Prevention confirms this as well, but they also mention that there are several other diseases that Black people get that are only unique to us, African American, although it can be seen in rare cases in white people. Here are those diseases below. The diseases that are particularly akin to Negroes. Let's listen. Sickle cell anemia, yup. Beta thalassemia, yup. Glucose 6-phosphate deficiency disease, that's the sugars. Septicemia. While there are many other diseases that the CDC failed to mention, these 4 diseases above have resulted in over 300,000 deaths of African Americans since our arrival to the Americas. And considering the fact that these diseases were not mentioned in the Bible, we can once again conclude that these curses are prophecies being fulfilled due to our ancestors' disobedience as well as our own. And let's pause. I'm not associative with any diseases akin to Jews that I can, in my mind, remember or peruse. I mean, if they had special illness, we'd know that too. I mean, they got special position, they got special admission, they got a special connection. It seems they need a special correction. I am kid you not. I smell the rot. I don't see them complaining of illnesses associated only with Jews. We'd hear about it. I'm telling you that. But these diseases that associate themselves with African Americans, they call us, and they are new diseases associated only with us. Isn't that interesting? To befall us. Next, here we go. While there are, and I've said that, and considering the fact that these diseases are not meant, and I said that next, boom, another physical curse that was prophesied to come upon the descendants of Israel was that their enemies would put iron chains around our necks. Now, let me ask you folks, you ever seen an iron chain around a Jewish person's neck in slavery? Ever? No. No. You ever seen it for 400 years? Ever? No. Moving on. In Deuteronomy 28:48, the prophet Moses spoke that, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. It is an established fact that when our ancestors were brought here as slaves, the Europeans would put yokes of iron around their necks to hold them captive on the ships and the slave ports. The reason we know this to be true because of the hundreds of various slave narratives that mentions them, slaves, having iron yokes around their necks. And let's not mention the pictures. In the great slave narratives of Arna Wendell Bontemps, a former slave by the name of Gustavus Voss, records that the manufacturing of neck yokes, collars, chains, leg bolts, and iron muzzles were used as instruments of torture in the slave trade. To confirm this account of neck yokes being used on slaves, let's visit the narrative of Austin Stewart in African American Slave Narratives, Volume 3, by Sterling Leketa Black. In his narrative, as Mr. Stewart is soon approaching freedom from slavery, he states, "I could not realize that my bonds were not yet broken, nor the yoke removed from off my neck. I was already free in spirit, and I silently exulted in the bright prospect of liberty." This is also confirmed by Solomon Northup's 12 Years a Slave, in which he states, "I have seen these poor creatures come out of the woods with a heavy ring around their neck and one around their ankle, and a heavy chain from one ring to the other, some chained up to the stumps. This was as the Rebs expressed it, to keep them from running away with the damned Yankees." Mr. Northup's testimony can also be seen visually, as it is now made into a film directed by Steve McQueen. And again, I ask you, at what point were Jews walking around with yokes and heavy rings around their goddamned necks? I'll say it again, we would have heard that. They tell us about every aspect regarding their suffering during the Holocaust. I was made to study every inch of every dynamic, of every infinitesimal note regarding the Holocaust, World War II. But in no place do I see anywhere necks had rings around them. I didn't see that. In light of these historical accounts by former slaves, who all confirm that having iron yokes being placed upon slaves' necks to be very common, we can easily conclude the so-called African Americans are bearers of this curse. Moving right along. Perhaps the best example of the physical curses being fulfilled on the so-called African Americans is the cursing of being lynched. What? As we all know, lynching has been a part of our history ever since we arrived to the Americas. But what many people don't know is that lynching has been around since biblical times. In Deuteronomy 21:23, it states, "He that is hanged on a tree is accursed of God." Back in those days when Israel was in rulership over the kingdoms of the world, to be hung on a tree was a sign to the public that you were cursed by God. For instance, when the Messiah took upon himself the curse of Israel's sin, he was hung on a tree by the Romans. He became the accursed of God. Paul confirmed this in his letter to the Galatians, when he stated, "Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree." However, many of the Jews did not receive the Messiah as being the Son of God. They not only rejected him, they called him a false prophet, and handed him over to the Romans to be persecuted. Negroes. As a result of their actions, the curse of being hung on a tree was then passed down to them and all of their descendants. Minister Elisha Israel confirmed this in his book Into Egypt, again with ships, stating that during the Roman siege of Israel, the sign of God's curse was upon the nation of Israel. The Romans constructed a wall around the city and crucified anyone found trying to escape. During this siege, the Romans showed no mercy in crucifying as many as 500 Negroes a day. That's right, I said Negroes. The crucifix was a sign of the curse of God upon Israel. And just as Israelites were hanged on trees in this siege, they have been hanged on trees throughout America's back. To prove that Mr. Israel's statement is a fact and not just theory, let's view some statistics of Black people being lynched since the 18th century. Founder and president of Issues for Life, Walter Hoy, recorded that over 86 years, the Ku Klux Klan, a racist, white supremacist group under the authority of the government that kills Black people for fun, lynched 3,446 Blacks. Wow. These are some very astonishing numbers. However, there are other research studies that state the number higher. According to studies from the Tuskegee Institute, Over 4,743 lynchings on Black Americans took place between the years of 1882 and 1968. And these are only the lynchings that have been recorded. When you combine these disheartening statistics with the fact that being hung on a tree is a biblical curse from God, it should be a no-brainer that we, the so-called African Americans, are the children of Israel. And to pause for the cause, I'll say this. These beings that occupy Israel, claiming to be Jews but are not, will soon suffer the prophecy of Obadiah. I'm not going to go there. All right, next, here we go. Psychological curses. Psychological curses. Let me tell you something. Psychologically, it's almost impossible for a Negro to make it in this system. Psychologically, it's a miracle or a sellout situation for any Negro to be successful under these circumstances. And I say that with all due goddamn respect. And these individuals seem to have no problem focusing on being as lucratively prosperous as possible. So let's talk about the psychological curses. Beyond the physical curses that were placed upon the children of Israel, there were also mental curses that were prophesied to befall on them, not in the sense of retardation, but in a sense of psychological depression, uncertainty, fear, and extreme anxiety. Moses hinted at some of these traits in Deuteronomy when he stated, "The Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart, and thou shalt grope at noondays as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee." Now, in order for us to understand this verse, we need to define some of these words that will help us read this verse in its proper context. The word astonishment means to be shockingly surprised. The word grope means to blindly search to find one's way. The context of this verse is future tense, when the children of Israel would be in the land of their captivity. It refers to the extreme pain and agony they would suffer when they arrived to the land of their enemies. So after connecting all the dots, what this verse is really saying is this: God would strike us with a psychological blindness that is so devastating that we would struggle to find our way in daylight, just like a blind man struggles to find his way at night. But no one would be able to cure us from our mental oppression. And if we take a real close look at what is being said here, we should be able to see that the mental blindness in this verse is referring to the mental illnesses that have been plaguing the so-called African Americans for decades. Although this is a taboo subject in the Black community, it is an established fact that Black people in America lead the nation in mental illnesses, and I might add, undiagnosed. Only the white society has more a privilege of being diagnosed and not taken care of. According to the United States HH Office of Minority Health, African Americans are 20% more likely to be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder than any other race in America. Their research also states that adult Blacks are more likely to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness than adult whites. And Black teenagers are more likely to attempt suicide than white teenagers. But our mental illness is not a result of any genetic retardation. It's a result of the continuous oppressiveness that we face every day in this country. Yeah, I added that. Unlike white people who are reaping the benefits of their ancestors who enslaved our ancestors, the majority of us are born in the ghettos and slums of America and have to bust our asses working for our oppressors for everything that we have. Look at the automotive strike and look at who's in the line. Look at the top of the chain, look at the top of the pyramid, and tell me what face you're staring at. We've also to endure racial discrimination in every arena of our lives. And you know what we do? We take it with a smile on our goddamned face. Oh, no, we don't. We'll risk losing everything that we have. With all of the pressure that we are under, it's no wonder why we as a people lead the nation in mental illnesses. Considering all of the adversity that we have to fight against to survive in America compared to other races of people, it makes perfect sense for us to be mentally sick. However, our mental handicap is not only a natural response to our oppression, it is also a generational curse for not obeying God's commandments. Ever since our people were exiled from our homeland over 2,000 years ago, we have been forsaking God's commandments, not just back then, but also today. From the embarrassing behavior that Black people display on reality TV shows and media events, to the abominable homosexuality that has crept into the local Black churches and schools, the lack of morality that has become the Black community is an utter disgrace to God. And as a result, we have to pay the price. You see, just as the legal system punishes us when we break their laws, our Father punishes us when we break his laws. Only his punishment is much worse than theirs because it is a spiritual punishment and comes in the form of curses. In Leviticus 26:36, our Father stated that, "And upon them that are left of you, I will send a faintness into their hearts in the lands of their enemies. And the sound of a driven leaf will chase them. And even when no one is pursuing, they will flee as though from the sword, and they will fall." In this verse, the Most High prophesies to us that we would be so scared of our oppressors that we would be running and dodging them, even when no one is chasing us. While many Bible scholars would argue that this verse is speaking of the days of illegalized slavery when our ancestors lived in a constant state of fear for what their slave masters might do to them, which is indeed true, I would argue that this verse is a reflection of our modern day times as well. For instance, the vast majority of the people who run the United States today, such as our governors, mayors, and police officers, are the descendants of the slave masters who oppressed our ancestors during the days of slavery. And although they are not hanging us on trees to die or separating our families by selling us to different plantation owners, as their ancestors did to our ancestors, they are, however, shooting us dead in the streets almost every day and sending us to prison for charges that white people get probation for. According to Todd Minton's Jail Inmates at Mid-Year, the so-called African Americans account for more than 70% of the inmates in American prisons. While this number is shockingly sad, what's even more alarming, and this is that African Americans also make up 90% of all the inmates that are proven to be wrongfully convicted, according to CNN. This means that the majority of all Black people in jail today probably shouldn't be there. Unfortunately, because of the corrupt judicial system we are under, most of us will never know. However, For the rest of us, we are fortunate enough to not be locked up behind bars. We are still left to face the most notorious hate group in America, the police. Yeah, I said it like that. I said it like that. Well, folks, again, I don't see this in their communities. I don't see them, just determined to, run from this or that. I don't see the mass arrests. I don't see the psychological damage done to Jews because they're being chased ad infinitum. I don't see any of that. What I see is a state of Israel, now in a state of war. I see too much evidence of who they are not for any Negro to ignore. Next, in Dr. Rudolph R. Windsor's book, The Valley of the Dry Bones, he stated that in the black ghettos throughout America, the police are practically all white, and they behave like an occupying army, shooting first and asking a dying man questions later. Although he made this statement over 20 years ago, it is just as true as it was back then. According to Gawker.com, over 76 unarmed black men and women have been murdered by white cops since 1999, and none of the officers have been indicted for their crimes. Well, we know that they got them for George Floyd, so we know how dated this book is. In the recent death of Eric Garner, which took place in July 2014, video footage of the white police officer strangling Mr. Garner to death as he held out his last words, "I can't breathe," went viral all over the internet for the world to see, yet the officer who killed him was not indicted. And have you ever seen them choke to death a Jew in the streets because he sold cigarettes until he said he couldn't breathe and expired? No! Considering incidents such as Mr. Garner's, coupled with the fact that the so-called African Americans account for over 70% of the inmates in prison, it becomes quite clear that any encounter with white law enforcement can either lead to imprisonment or be a life or death situation. Consequently, this instills fear into the minds of our people, so much fear that we run from our oppressors even when they are not pursuing us. In my line of work as a youth mentor, I've heard countless youths and adults tell me, "I'm always scared for my life when I'm behind the wheel. Every time I see blue lights, cops, police behind me and near me, my heart skips a beat." I've also had parents tell me, "I fear for my son's life every time he leaves the house, afraid that he might have a run-in with the police and not come back home." It is comments like these which I have seen to hear more often than now than more ever that link the prophecy of Moses, which said, even when no one is pursuing, they will flee as though from the sword, and they will fall to us, the so-called African Americans. Another major form of mental illness that we as a people are suffering from today is called the Stockholm Syndrome. In case you're not familiar with this illness, let me explain it to you. The Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological perception in which slaves or captives express extreme sympathy or positive feelings toward their enslavers or capturers, to the point of defending and identifying with them rather than their fellow hostages. How many Negroes you know like that? Smiling at them and let them smile back. Stockholm Syndrome first took root in the minds of black people during the 16th century after slavery became legal here in the United States. It was originally used as a defense mechanism for our ancestors to survive their dreadful lives as slaves by pretending to love the slave master and be his lookout for obedient slaves. It earned the slave master's favor and made being a slave less painful. We sick? However, as time passed, the defense mechanism backfired by developing such deep roots in the minds of the slaves that they began to identify more with the needs and wants of their slave masters than of their fellow slaves. Consequently, this produced an entire generation, not just physical slaves, but mental slaves. This mental illness was so powerful that even after our ancestors were released from slavery, The vast majority of them still carried out the Stockholm Syndrome and carried it with them. And they didn't want to separate from their oppressors. As a result, many of them unknowingly passed this mental illness down to their children, who passed it down to theirs, and after many generations, it was passed down to us. Today, this is why there are so many of us black people living in predominant white neighborhoods. Because we as a people would rather be amongst our oppressors than our own. For example, what is the first thing we as a people do when we so-called make it in this white man's world? We move out of the hood that we grew up in into a neighborhood full of white people and start making friends with rich white people while neglecting our black friends that we grew up with. And let me just interject, black friends that would grow resentful, and so resentful that they would more likely attack your black ass in that same neighborhood, leaving your family members victims of their jealousy. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, then. Jennifer. Many of our people even start dating predominantly white people instead of our own people and badmouth our race in the process. But why do we do this? Why are people so ready to depart from their own and integrate with their oppressors? The answer is quite simple. We have the Stockholm Syndrome. Once our people get a taste of what America calls success, we immediately separate ourselves from any remembrance of blackness that we have, striving our best to integrate with our oppressors. These characteristics are clearly present in many of today's black communities, especially in the entertainment industry. For instance, former Cosby Show star Raven Simone told Oprah Winfrey during an interview on her show that I am a colorless person. She's also a lesbian. In regards to not wanting to be labeled as a person of African descent, you don't want to be what you are. I hear you. You just want to be a star. Another example would be pro golfer Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, who when asked about what his race is on the Oprah Winfrey, Oprah just got him confessing, went out of his way to construct his own racial group, Cablinasian. That didn't really go anywhere. Cablinasian didn't go anywhere. A mixture of black, Caucasian, black, Indian, and Asian. Negro, please. It's a wonder that woman didn't hit you in your, all for the sake of saying I am not black. Then we have the super actress, or the superstar actress, Zoe Saldana, who has both Haitian and Dominican roots, stating there is no such thing as people of color to a BET News reporter in response to what was her ethnicity. And the list goes on and on. This woman said that. I got no respect for her no more. Zoe Saldana is off my list. Every movie I wish I missed. That is cold and bold. As we can see, our most prominent influential black celebrities of today, who our kids look up to and idolize, have no desire to be or take up for black people or blackness. In fact, some of our Negro celebrities hate the color of their skin so much that they actually bleach it to look more like our oppressors. Baseball Hall of Famer Sammy Sosa, I did that wrong. Reggae artist V's Cartel, actress Stacey Dash lost her mind. Dear God, Stacey Dash and rap star Lil' Kim. No, somebody lied to Lil' Kim. That's all that is. Just to name a few, have all bleached their skin to look white like our oppressors. Consequently, many of our youths who look up to these celebrities are following in their footsteps and bleaching their skin to look like our oppressors as well. Even the children who don't have a desire to bleach their skin still review the color white as superior to black. According to a 2005 study done by filmmaker Kiri Davis in the process of making her movie A Girl Like Me, young black girls in the ghetto desired to be white more than they desired to be black. To come to this conclusion, Ms. Davis' study consisted of young black girls in a New York City public school, each being shown two identical dolls, one dark-skinned and the other white-skinned. Using identical groups, the young black girls at this school were asked to choose the best doll, resulting in over 90% of them choosing the white doll. When the children were asked why they chose the white doll, they all concluded that the white dolls were better and that black dolls were bad. And unfortunately, our adults who are in leadership positions, such as musicians and athletes who have the influence to combat this mental illness by promoting Black is beautiful, instead use their influence to promote white supremacy. However, most of all, Black leaders today are so blinded that they don't realize that what they are promoting is a form of self-hatred. They think that it's normal to want to be like white people, date white people, and look like white people. And the reason why they think that desiring to be like our oppressors is normal is because they have the Stockholm Syndrome. It just goes unnoticed because we have been raised by our parents who have it also, whom were raised by parents who had it, and so on and so on. Furthermore, since mental blindness was said to be one of the generational curses of the children of Israel, and the Stockholm Syndrome is only generational in the African American race, then we can further conclude that we, and not them, are the children of Israel. However, our condition does not have to stay like this. We can break free from this horrific mental illness called the Stockholm Syndrome. We're willing to adhere to the truth. As the Messiah stated in the book of Matthew, when we learn the truth will set us free. And where do you find the truth? Not chasing behind your oppressors, but in the word of God. In Proverbs, King Solomon laid out the cure for Stockholm Syndrome, plain and simple, when he stated, "Envy not thou oppressor, and choose none of his ways." Integration and interracial relations are the ways of our oppressors, not God. All throughout the scriptures, God has always told us not to integrate with other nations or marry outside of our own. Yet, we have always disobeyed him and sought to be integrated with our oppressors. This is why I believe that the Most High has allowed the Stockholm Syndrome to take over our minds and divide us as a people, because we are living in sin when we try to integrate and marry outside our nation or race. And God will not help us while we are willingly living in sin. Therefore, the cure to the Stockholm Syndrome is simple. Stop following your oppressors and start following God. All right, so I've been at this a minute and I can keep going. This is just a chapter, generational curses. Here's the thing. I don't see them suffering from mental illness. I don't see the effects of mental illness contributing to all that we see in the Negro community, yet they claim to be Israel. I don't see any kind of Stockholm Syndrome. They're not clinging to another group. They will never say or condone marriage outside of their own. And this has been since they were Khazarians, from the line of Japheth, having absolutely no association with Shem. That's them. Now, I can continue if you would like me to continue. I don't see a reason why I should not. Let me see how much more reading I've got. I haven't got that much more reading, so I believe this information you will all be needing. I can read through that. Yeah. So here we go. Lastly, the economical curses. The economical, now look, these are the three types of sectioned off curses that they put in this chapter. Generational curses, okay? And look, these folks ain't cash poor. This is a fact we can't ignore. These folks got the Skrilla. You know, more than a banana got a gorilla. I had to just roll that in there because you know it's not fair, but let's move in here. Okay. Economical curses, in addition to the physical and psychological curses that have been placed upon us and not them. Us, true Israel, our identity. We are also suffering from economical curses. So, if you've ever wondered why we as a people can't seem to prosper financially as a whole like other races do, you are about to get your answer. Here we go. In Deuteronomy, the prophet Moses stated, The alien who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower. He shall lend to you, but you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail. Wow, that chapter started off quite nice, didn't it? Because you know that's where we're living. And that's the treatment we're getting. When you break down this verse down in modern day terms, it tells us that the foreigners and other races that live in the same country that the Hebrews or Israelites lived in will rise up the economical ladder higher than us, while we decline lower and lower to the point that we will have to go to them for everything. Well, considering our current condition as a people, this verse could be referring to no one else but us, because it ain't referring to them. For instance, so-called African Americans have been living in America since the early 16th century and living in the South and Central America and the islands since the 14th century. We've been in this country longer than any other group of people, right along with the so-called Native Americans, yet we have watched foreigners of all nations migrate to this land under their own free will and rise higher and higher above us economically. As a result, we have declined lower and lower, so low that we lead the nation in poverty. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2014, it is estimated that over 2.15 million African Americans are actively searching for work. This means that 2.15 million Black people are unemployed and unable to provide an income for their families. On the contrary, over 1.5 million Asians living in America own their own businesses, and over 70% of Arab Americans are self-employed as well. So while the Asians and Arabians are migrating to America, starting their own businesses, and prospering on all levels economically, we who were born here can't find a job. This, my friend, is not a coincidence. This is a curse. In Deuteronomy, Prophet Moses stated that because you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and gladness of heart, for the abundance of everything, therefore you shall serve your enemies, whom the Lord will send against you in hunger, in thirst, in nakedness, and in need of everything. And he will put a yoke of iron on your neck until he has destroyed you. This verse is telling us that because we are, as a people, have not returned back to the covenant that God gave to our forefathers, then he has turned us over to the authority of our oppressors. And as a result, we have to go to them for all our needs. Now, real quick, just to pause for the cause, when have you seen a Jew go to someone else for their needs? When do you see these people occupying Israel, in which they tell people this is them? They say that this description is them. When have you ever seen them do this? Never. And they'll never tell you that they have. Because they can't. Because they're not us. They're not Hebrews. They're Jewish. Somewhat Jews. Biblical historian Jeremy Shorter confirms this in his work, The Hidden Treasure That Lies in Plain Sight, by stating the following. The so-called Negroes take their money to the stranger, which makes jobs available for their people, while their so-called Negroes remain unemployed. Only in the Black community do you find every other ethnic group running the businesses. For example, the Arabs own the grocery stores and fast food restaurants. The Asians own the clothing stores, nail salons, and beauty salons. The East Indians own the convenience stores and gas stations. The white Caucasians own the rest, and the Hebrews own little, if any, businesses in their communities. Mr. Shorter's account of our economic condition is right on the money. There are businesses in almost every Black community or neighborhood in America owned by every racial group except Black people. The irony of this is that while we are so quick to spend our money helping non-black owned businesses succeed, other races will be damned if they support anything black owned. Did you hear that, Negroes? You open up a store in their neighborhood and see how many of them patron you. It's not just that we can't get help from each other. You can best believe the rest of the nations won't give us business to save our goddamned lives. This is being a Hebrew in America, a Negro. I don't see them going through this generational curse. And I'll be damned if you see a Negro put a store in a Jewish neighborhood. Meaning, and it has nothing to do with racism. They're just practicing group economics. Did you hear that? Practicing group economics, meaning they only buy from and hire people within their own race, if they can help it, so that their group of people can prosper without being dependent on the white man for their well-being. This is how every racial group in America practices economics except us. We are the only people in America who do not support our own, but will willingly support a business that will not hire them. Did you hear that? And this is why we stay at the bottom, while the other races rise to the top. In regards to coming up with a solution to overcome our economic woes, many of our black leaders today, such as Dr. Claude Anderson and Dr. Umar Johnson, have suggested that if black people as a whole would just unite and put our money together, then we could start small communities full of black-owned businesses in every black city and be just as prosperous as the other races. And while I have the utmost respect for both Dr. Claude and Dr. Umar, I believe their proposal to be only true in the short term, but false for the long term. I agree. And what I mean by that is this: yes, we most definitely could put our money together and start a massively successful black community, but eventually the powers that be will destroy them, just as they have done to all of the others who started successful black communities in the past. Tulsa. Have you ever heard of Black Wall Street? In case you haven't, they were a completely black-owned community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, during the early 1900s. The best description of Black Wall Street, or Little Africa as they called it, would have been like to be a mini Beverly Hills. The area encompassed over 600 different businesses and 36 square blocks, with a population of 15,000 so-called African Americans. Within their community, they had jewelry stores, clothing stores, movie theaters, restaurants, churches, pawn shops, farms, doctors' offices, and even their own medical schools. This community was so prosperous that the dollar circulated 35 to 100 times before it leave the community. That's prosperity. But by the year 1920, white people had begun to grow very bitter and jealousy from Cain to these. White people became bitter and jealous over seeing black people attain success in America, and they plotted to take this community down. Let me tell you the story. On June 1st, 1921, the Ku Klux Klan and a bunch of other white racists sent missiles and bombs to this community, burning down 1,500 homes and killing over 3,000 black people. In a period of spanning more than 12 hours, a once thriving black-owned district in Tulsa, Oklahoma was destroyed, and nobody was arrested for it. Still grinning. However, this not only happened to Black Wall Street, this happened to every black-owned community that rose in the 1900s. From the Seneca village of Manhattan, New York, to the Haiti district of Durham, North Carolina, every successful black community that black people started has either been shut down by the government or burned down by neighboring white residents. So when they tell you to pick you up by your bootstraps, you tell them to shut their goddamned mouths. You know how many black communities are underwater that they wanted? These rancid ass motherfuckers. How dare you smile in their fucking faces? Therefore, it wouldn't make sense for us to take the advice of starting our own black-owned community based on subdivision. Because as history has proven to us, it will eventually be destroyed. Remember, we are living in the land of our oppressors. And a black-owned subdivision in the city that caters to the needs of blacks will reduce their ability to oppress us, so they would never allow one to have everlasting success. You better hear me, Negroes. You gotta get out of this fucking place. The only way a black-owned community could survive without white America destroying it would be for it to be done in the country, at least 5 to 100 miles away from the nearest city. Even then, they'd come. Because it couldn't sit with these mental fucking midgets that somewhere Negroes are doing well. They would intrude their nosy white asses in our business and try to infiltrate 1,000 miles away. No, that's not Red, that's me. I've seen quite a few black communities get started in the country that are still around today because no one knows about them. But I have yet to see any black-owned community or movement in general survive in any major city of America without the government or the white people shutting it down. You goddamned right. That's who they are. Staying on the topic of coming up with a financial solution for our people, I've also heard other black leaders of ours, such as Bishop T.D. Jakes, he ain't my fucking leader, and Minister Farrakhan propose that more black people just need to start their own businesses in general. I've done that. As an entrepreneur myself, I agree with their proposal wholeheartedly. However, starting more or black-owned businesses still will not cure the economic woes of our people. According to the Encyclopedia of African American Business, black people start their own businesses 3 times the rate of any other race in America. However, black businesses fail over 3 times the rate any other race as well. In his work, African Americans in Business, Master Sergeant Johnny L. Green reported that black businesses fail at a very high rate. 30% within 3 years, 75% within 5 years, and 80% within 10 years. Considering these statistics, we can see that starting our own business, that's not the answer to the problem. Keeping them open is. But please do not think that I'm sharing our financial calamities with you to make you think that everything you touch will end up disastrous, because that is not my motive. The only reason I'm sharing our financial problems with you is to prove that we are suffering curses that were handed down by the Almighty God, which means that these curses can't be broken naturally. They can only be broken spiritually. As a spiritual advisor, he proposes the reason that we can't keep our businesses open is because we're not keeping our Father's commandments. For example, one of God's commandments is to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. By our neighbor, he means your fellow brothers and sisters, the so-called African American. If we were to follow this one commandment and love our people just as we loved ourselves, then our business failure rate would decrease and our success rate would increase. How so? Because you support people that you love. To give you a real-life example of this, let's say that you saw that your neighbor had just opened up a kitchen appliances shop down the street, but you normally go to Walmart to get your appliances. If you loved your neighbor as yourself, you would view their entrepreneurial endeavors as your very own, and you would want them to support them because you want to see their businesses succeed. And if each of us had this mentality that any black person in America could open up a business and count on his people to help them keep it open, assuming it has a great product or service. Okay, our support would not only help black businesses stay open, but it would bring in enough business for the owner to have to hire more employees, which would naturally be us, their supporters. In return, the black unemployment rate would go down because those of us who couldn't get hired by white America would now be able to find work with our own people. It's best to work with our own people. And all of this would happen as a result of us simply loving our people as we love ourselves. But since we as a people don't love each other, we don't support each other, and consequently our businesses keep failing. The sad part is we have no idea as to why. And this reminds me of what Moses said in Deuteronomy, which states, the Lord will send on you cursing, confusion, and rebuke in all that you set your hand to do. I have felt this, Negroes, and I know you have too. I want to read that because that's very important that you hear this. The Lord will send on you cursing. This is from Deuteronomy 28:20. I'm discovering this just like you folks. And confusion and rebuke in all that you set your hand to do. I got to ask you just real quick, brothers and sisters, have you ever, as a Negro, attempted to get ahead on your own? Have you ever set to the task all alone? And have you ever felt a pressing hand upon you, restricting you from advancement? Have you ever kind of felt it just descend upon you? And in my belief, I believe that that is the Spirit telling us that we're not to make it here. This is not the place. They don't want to see success on a Negro face. And so when I read this, Deuteronomy 28:20, it's very, very interesting that it says, the Lord will send on you confusion, and rebuke in all that you set your hand to do. Until you be destroyed, until you perish because of the wickedness of thy doings, whereby thou hast forsaken me. In this verse, Moses tells us that as a result of Israel's past and present disobedience to God, he would put a curse on them that will leave them confused and rebuked in everything that they set out to accomplish. I feel that sometimes. And this is the exact predicament that we as a people are in today, rebuked in our finances and confused as to why. But the reason why is because we are his children, and he is punishing us for our sins against him. In Amos 3:2, the Father tells us, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. Pay attention to that, folks. Amos 3:2 says, the Father tells us that you only have I known of all the families of the earth. That doesn't set well with these folks who call themselves Jews over in Israel. The Father has never known them or their families. He's only known Negroes. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities. The reason why the Father doesn't punish these other nations is because he only has a covenant with Israel. Therefore, since we are the only race of people in the Americas who are suffering the wrath of God, we can further conclude that we, not them, we, Negroes, are the children of Israel. And I do believe, yes, that's the last page. All right, well, I do thank everyone for being here, and I appreciate your time. That is some eye-opening information. And the reason it's prescient today, the reason it's relevant is because right now, the people that occupy Israel claim to be the people of the book. And in the book, there are generational curses to identify those people. And it doesn't add up. I have not seen any of these individuals suffer any of the curses spoken of in any respect. And I'm going to say this without any regret. They will never tell you that they suffered any of these curses. They are a proud synagogue of Satan-filled European converts to Judaism. They are not true Jews. They are Jewish. And so the conflict today, predicated on their claiming to be Negroes, is a conflict beset upon them rightfully, as they occupy land and a position of which they have absolutely no right to. And it will not be more likely until they admit this openly. And we Negroes are permitted to go back to our rightful land and are put back in our rightful position, that they will never, ever be at peace. I believe that's God's mission. All right, that's it, folks. Thanks so much for showing up. This is the Doug Rice Show. And again, if you like what you hear, please open your purse and your wallets and bring them near. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. Listen, Cash App is the easiest way to show your appreciation. Again, I am now a free agent, and this is how I start my day, 7 a.m., Monday through Friday, on Sundays at noon. And that day will come about here near too soon. We've been here an hour and a half. I want to thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, please share this. This is the format of the show. We take different chapters from different publications that are Negro-centric, Negro-friendly. And I believe we're getting better at this. So, hey, tune in. All right. Thank you so much. 11:37 on the 11th of October, 2023. When you're done with me, please watch Suspicious Observers on YouTube. Please watch Mr. MBB333 on YouTube. Please watch Divergent on YouTube. But if you don't watch anything on YouTube, please watch TL Ministries, Brother Yacoba and Brother Teo, because those two, and right up, bringing up the most important is their Dante Fortson. Those, that trifecta of ministers to get spiritual nourishment, those are the only individuals I recommend. But I recommend those YouTube channels as well. All right, folks. Oh, and New York Prepper and Canadian Prepper. Watch New York Prepper. I mean, he's a pro. He's a Zionist, but he's got his, you got to watch these people. Watch them. All right, I got to go. You guys have a wonderful day. Now, there are 21 people in here. What I might do at some point, we're running a little long today. What I will do in future shows is have guests on. I'm a little nervous of what you folks might say, because, and then I'm nervous of what I might reply, because you know how I am. You know how am I. All right, well, please add me. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on X, rather. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I will do a TikTok live here at some point in the future. But I do have to go, folks. Hey, you have yourself a wonderful day. This is the Doug Rice Show, and that's all I've got to say. Bye-bye now. Wait! Hold on. Hey! Listen, folks. Oh, my God. I almost forgot, because, the show was so long. Look, I know you got to go out there today. I know it's, you got to get on your way. You got to go to work. It's probably, you're probably headed in just about now. It's almost 9, right? We've gone through some stuff this morning, and look what's going on out there. It's getting crazy. Opinions are flying, all right? And you just gotta maintain your serious countenance as a Negro these days. Let me tell you something. They know what you're thinking. That nervous smile you're getting now that this war going on, your company had better support Israel or it'll go out of business. You better ask somebody. Okay? So if you got to go up in their white spaces, do me a favor, get that goddamned grin off your faces. All right, I got to go. It was a good show. Bye-bye.